have some clients ask me how they began to read tarot, and of course the first step is to choose a tarot deck. When I answer this question, I have to tell them, as I'm telling you, it's a very personal relationship that you begin when you choose a tarot deck. And I'm going to give you just a brief summary of how I went about it and how I go about it now. The very first deck I was ever given was actually not tarot. They were rune cards, these beautiful rune cards that you see here. And here's the book of runes. So the very first deck, when I really understood that I was tuning in to the energy of our unity field, it was with these beautiful rune cards here. The self, the number one rune. Yeah. It always begins and ends with the self. So this is the perfect card that's come up right now. I tuned into these cards very easily. The book, actually, I think this was 30 years ago that I first began working with these cards. And the book said to put the cards under my pillow so that they would get to know me and I them. And so I did that for probably 2 weeks, and allowed the energy to integrate, my energy with the cards and the cards with me. And I read the book, began interpreting, laying out spreads and interpreting the rune cards. And I recognized immediately how they resonated with what I was feeling. And of course, I read for myself in the beginning and gradually ventured out to read for others. But I began with the rune cards first, and it was an amazing connection. The next thing that happened is I was given the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which is probably the most famous deck that of tarot cards that everyone recognizes. This is an iconic deck and something that everybody recognizes. This deck also resonated with me, and this was where I really began reading for other people 25, 30 years ago. And I understood the energy that was going on. So I related to these very easily and understood where I was with it. So as I kept working with these cards, someone else gave me the Thoth deck. And it took me a while, actually, before I picked up this deck and understood how they resonated with me. But again, it grew on me, and this is now the deck I use almost all the time. I may use other decks in conjunction with the Thoth deck as a reading, but if you're just beginning to read tarot cards, it might be easier to begin with the Waite-Smith deck because of the iconic nature, and it's actually very easy to read these cards. You can get a lot of depth, and I know people who have been reading for decades who still choose this deck as their main deck that they read from, which is absolutely okay, because it resonates. It really all boils, I keep using that word because that's really all it boils down to. You can read many books on this deck. There are probably hundreds written. And it's good to understand all the different interpretations, because you will see different interpretations of this deck, of the Thoth deck. What you need to recognize is what intuitively feels right to you. When you pick up a card, when you are reading a card for a client, and you have something like the Aeon come up, no matter what it says, in one of the many books about the Thoth deck. It's what resonates intuitively within you that you need to say to your client or to yourself if you're reading. So again, the Thoth deck is what I use a lot right now. It does tend to be a little bit more in-depth and complicated for some people, but for me, I'm very tuned into it. There are other decks that I love. The Tarot of the Alchemical Magnum Opus and the Alchemical Tarot, also by Robert Place. Both of those resonate with me. These are archetype cards to me. This gets to the nature. Alchemy, spiritual alchemy, is what is the deepest part of who we are. That's what spiritual alchemy is. And these cards really resonate with me deeply. I have a new deck that I'm getting to know, the Tarot of the Everlasting Day. And these are beautiful cards that I am just learning to read. They have just come out. As you can see, they're just absolutely beautiful. There's the Chariot. Look how gorgeous that is. And that's the Aeon. That's Aeon Flux. Isn't that gorgeous? This is the Hermit. The Path. It's just the interpretation by Marcus and Talia Katz and Janine Hall is just fantastic on this. Here's the High Priestess. Or no, this is the Magician who looks very close to the High Priestess. There's Death. So as you can see, here's the High Priestess. This is energy that I am tuning into and that feels very good to me. I will spend time getting to know these cards, and it's a very intimate relationship that you develop. Once you feel the intimacy of the cards where they begin to speak to you, that's when you know that you have a deck that is right for you. Now, I used to be able to go into tarot shops or shops that sold tarot cards, and you could look at the decks, you could touch them. That really does not happen much anymore, and it doesn't really need to. There are thousands of tarot decks, oracle decks that are available, and so you can look online. And if you just listen to that subtle voice within you, if you just allow yourself to recognize the very subtle symbols and intuitively I call them pings. If I get an intuitive ping towards something, I have to pay attention to it. And it does take practice, but I recommend that that's an approach to use as you choose a tarot deck. So again, just to recap, if you want to begin with a simple deck, then start with something like the Waite-Smith deck, because it is very simple and so many books available to teach you how to read, and from there you take off on your own. And then you just work from what feels right to you.